You already know what your bank account says. I'm not here to talk about the number. I'm here to talk about what the number does to you, to your brain, to your body, to the way you sleep, to which phone calls you answer, and which ones you let ring. Nobody ever tells you that part. The finance books talk about compound interest. The motivational videos talk about mindset. Nobody sits down slowly, honestly, and walks you through what actually happens. Level by level, dollar by dollar, the psychology, the relationships, the specific kind of loneliness that money builds around you as it grows. I'm going to do that now, from $10 all the way to 100 million. Don't leave. The part that's about you is closer than you think. $10 not a gift, not something you found. What's left? It's 9 p.m. You're standing in a convenience store. The light in here is too bright for this hour, the kind of light that makes everyone look a little sick, a little exposed. You're holding a cup of instant noodles. $1.40. You don't need a calculator. The math is already done. $10 minus 140. What that leaves you, what that means for the next 4 days. You put the noodles on the counter. You don't look at the cashier. Not because you're ashamed you keep telling yourself that, but because looking up means being fully present. And being fully present in this moment is something your nervous system has learned to avoid. This is not hunger, not yet. This is the awareness of hunger. The knowledge that one missed shift, one unexpected bill, one quiet voicemail, sorry, we're going in a different direction, and something you don't want to name gets a lot closer. This is the fear that never announces itself. It just lives in the walls, in the back of every decision, in why you check your balance 3 times before you sleep. Growing up, you watched people talk about money the way they talked about the weather, casually, like it was background noise. In your house, it was not background noise. It was the thing your parents whispered about in the kitchen after the lights were off. The reason a conversation stopped the moment you walked into the room. The subject that was always happening, just never out loud. Money wasn't a topic in your house. Money was a wound. So you never learned how it moves. You learned something else. You learned how to live without it, how to be invisible at checkout, how to gauge a person's mood before asking for anything, how to calculate whether you can afford to get sick before you let yourself get sick. You've always worked. That was never the problem. The problem is this. Effort without direction doesn't compound. It just exhausts. You don't know that yet. Tonight, you just know you're tired, and you don't want to be rich. Not yet. Rich belongs to other people. You don't want a different planet. You want ground under your feet, solid, non-negotiable, nobody can take this from me ground. You want to stop doing the math. That's the whole dream. Walk into a store and just buy the thing without calculating. Get sick without your first thought being the cost. Sleep through the night without the 3 a.m. inventory. You get a job. Not a career, a job, a uniform. A manager who still hasn't learned your name right, even though it's been on your chest every shift for 3 months. The pay isn't good, but it's consistent. And when you've been living on the edge of unpredictable this long, consistent feels like oxygen. You save $200. You hide it somewhere hard to reach because you know yourself. You don't trust the impulsive version of you yet. Accessing it has to be a decision, not a reflex. Then the car breaks down, or the phone shatters, or someone you can't say no to needs something, and you're the only person they have. The $200 disappears. 3 times you save it. 3 times something takes it before it becomes anything. But the 4th time is different. You watch the money leave, and instead of the familiar resignation, of course, this is just how it is, you feel something you haven't felt before. Anger, not at the expense, not at the person, at the pattern you didn't choose. The one nobody handed you the manual to exit, and something shifts. You stop asking, how do I survive this? You start asking, how does any of this actually work? You find a book, not the motivational kind. Those inflate you for a day and deflate you worse. Like eating sugar when what you need is protein. A real book about why some people's money grows while they sleep and why other people's disappears while they work. You read it in the break room on your lunch hour. Your coworkers laugh, lightly, the way people laugh at things they don't want to understand. Because understanding would mean admitting something uncomfortable about themselves. You keep reading. You save $400. The impulse to spend it comes. It always comes dressed as something reasonable. But this time you pause, long enough to ask one question, is this the thing? Or is this the thing that prevents the thing? You don't spend it. You have never, not once, had money and not spent it. This is the first time. The first shift isn't in your account, it's in your head. And once it happens, you can't go back to who you were before it. A few years pass. $34,000 a year, $3,200 saved. From the outside, you look stable, functional. You have a phone plan, a lease, a credit score that doesn't embarrass you. But one night, midnight, spreadsheet open, nobody watching? You run the real numbers. No optimism, just math. $34,000, save 20%, invest it, withdraw at 65. The number at the end is fine. It's enough to not be destitute. It is not enough to be free. And you sit there realizing, for the first time, really realizing, fine and free are not the same thing. You have been living as though they were. A salary is a straight line. It moves up, slowly, predictably, one rung at a time. Wealth is a curve. And a curve needs something a salary alone will never give you. So you start something on the side. You don't name it. Naming it creates expectations. Expectations create pressure. You just do a thing, using a skill you have for people who need it. $150 the first month, $300, then $600. You reinvest everything. Same food, same clothes, same apartment. Nothing changes on the outside. Everything is changing on the inside. Your net worth crosses $10,000. First time in your life. You check it 3 times in 1 hour. Not from anxiety, but from something that doesn't have a clean name. Disbelief, maybe. Wonder, maybe. Like touching a wall you weren't sure was real? $18,000, $27,000. And here's where it gets harder, because now the environment starts pushing back. Not loudly, never loudly, just quietly, persistently. A friend who stops inviting you out after 2 no's. A family member who reads your discipline as judgment. A coworker who jokes that you think you're too good for the group lunch because you keep not being there. These aren't bad people. They are people who were also never taught, also raised on silence and avoidance, on the unspoken agreement that wanting more is somehow ungrateful. Above your station, you are trying to leave the station, and leaving any station, any environment, any level feels like abandonment to the people still in it, even when you never meant it that way. You say no to the weekend trip, not because you're unkind, because $400 not compounding is not $400. It's $400 multiplied by every year you're alive after this one. You've done the math enough to know the difference. The friend doesn't speak to you for 3 weeks. You sit with that. You don't apologize for the decision. You apologize for how it landed. Those are different things. And you're learning to hold both. Then, on a Tuesday, unremarkable, like all the important days, your side income crosses your salary for the first time. You don't celebrate, you just sit very still. And something that had been clenched in your chest for longer than you can remember releases, just slightly, just enough. You breathe differently. Net worth, $61,000. The first number that feels like it belongs to someone who is building, not just surviving. You quit the job with the name tag. The hardest year of your adult life. Not because of money. The money is growing. Slowly, imperfectly, but growing. Hard because of identity. You've spent your entire life inside structures that told you who you were. Employee, student, tenant. The kid from that block with those prospects. Outside the structure, you're just a person. And being just a person with no institution to confirm you're doing it right is terrifying in a way nobody warns you about. Some mornings you wake at 5 a.m., not from discipline, from the anxiety of freedom, the knowledge that today's outcome depends entirely on what you decide to do with today. No floor, no ceiling either. You make mistakes. A partnership that collapsed the moment money got real. 5 months working for free because you underpriced everything. An investment you entered because someone you respected was in it, and you learned the hard way. Other people's conviction is not a substitute for your own understanding. Every mistake costs money and time, which you now understand is more finite and more expensive than money will ever be. But every mistake also leaves something behind, something that can't be bought. Pattern recognition, the specific kind that only comes from being wrong in that exact way, with your own actual money on the line. You can't read your way to that. You can only earn it. Net worth, $140,000. Built through mistakes more than wins. Not rich, but no longer surviving. The distance between those two things is larger than any number can capture. At $300,000, your money develops a personality. This sounds strange until you experience it. Capital in this quantity begins to behave like something with preferences, directions it wants to move, patterns it amplifies, risks it tolerates, and risks it doesn't. You lose $14,000 on a position that moves against you. You don't spiral, you don't panic sell, you don't lie awake, you analyze, you rebalance, you stay in. This is what people on the outside never understand about wealth. They think the wealthy avoid risk. They don't. They choose which risks to sit with. They understand the difference between volatility, temporary, can be waited out, and actual loss, which is permanent and can't. Treating them as the same thing is expensive. You have a property, a portfolio, a business that runs partially without you, which is an entirely different feeling from being the only engine in the machine. Same car as 3 years ago. You don't talk about any of this. Talking about money at this level helps no one. People with less hear bragging. People with more don't need to hear it, so you go quiet. But the quiet has a cost. You are building something nobody around you can see. And there's a specific loneliness in that, carrying a reality that doesn't translate to the people you love. You stop trying to explain. You build instead. Because the quiet, you've learned, is not the enemy. The quiet is where compounding happens. Net worth, $410,000. It took longer than planned. It always does. $670,000. You call your mother, not to tell her the number. You never tell anyone the number. But you pay off something she's carried for 11 years without complaining. Because complaining is not something she ever let herself do. She asks why. Because I can. She doesn't speak for a moment. In that silence, you feel something you haven't felt since the convenience store, except reversed. Not the weight of what's missing, the weight of what you've built. This is what all those years of silence were for. Not the number, this moment, $810,000. You walk past a shop window, you see something you would have calculated for 3 weeks. You go in, you buy it, you leave. Nobody witnesses it. It doesn't matter. $940,000. The number is close enough now that you stop checking it daily. Not from discipline, from a calm you've never felt before, because you've never had it before. The math has stopped being urgent. The math has started being inevitable. A morning in March. Nothing special about the date. The portfolio updates the way it always does. $1 million, same table, same coffee, same light through the window. You expected something to shift. Some felt sense of arrival, a fanfare. What comes instead is quieter, more complicated, real satisfaction, earned, not performed. A stillness unlike any before. And then, almost immediately, just underneath the satisfaction, this is a starting point, not a finish line, a proof of concept, proof that the system works, that the thinking was right, that the pattern you committed to years ago, in a break room with a book your coworkers mocked, it works. The million isn't the point. The million is evidence the method is sound. You sit with the coffee cooling and realize something that reframes everything. You have spent your entire life catching up to a baseline you felt born behind, to people who had ground you were never given. Every decision shaped by that deficit, that gap, that quiet voice that said, you started behind. You have stopped catching up. You are not catching up to anyone. You are building something that exists in its own terms. Not arrogance. Something rarer. Standing on both feet for the first time, without the weight of the deficit pulling. Money is not what you accumulate. It's what you no longer have to do. At $2.5 million, you meet people who become the most important relationships of your professional life. Not for what they give you, for how they think. They don't think in quarters. They think in cycles. Credit cycles, demographic cycles, infrastructure cycles that unfold over 15 years, and only reward people patient enough to stay in them. You study them the way you study books in the break room. Quietly, without announcing it. You watch not what they decide, but how. The pace, the absence of urgency, the comfort with uncertainty that isn't recklessness. It's structural confidence. You stop trying to win quickly. You start trying to last. This is the mental shift that keeps most people at $100,000. Not intelligence, not effort. The model of winning, the perfect deal, the one move that changes everything. That model is built for a sprint. What you are running is not a sprint. You fire the wealth manager who talked too much and knew too little. You find someone better. He charges more, says almost nothing. What he says is exact. You keep him. You take 3 weeks off. You don't check messages for 5 days. You've paid for longer trips before when you had less, but you've never had 5 days of genuine non-presence. 5 days when the machine ran without your attention being the fuel. That's not a vacation. That's proof. At $5 million, you are no longer building. You are positioning. Sounds like a small difference. It isn't. Building needs your presence, your energy, your body in the room. Positioning needs your judgment, your understanding of where things are going. Capital placed in alignment with that, and then patience. Without flinching when the timeline extends, without abandoning the position because the market moved off your schedule. You're in a deal that returns $700,000 in 14 months. You're in another that may return nothing. You understand the relationship between them. One structures the risk of the other. Their correlation is the actual trade. You meet people at $20 million, $50 million. You study them, not what they own, how they move. Extraordinary patience. They are not reacting. They ask questions that have already done work before you've answered them. You stop talking about money with people who don't have it. Not contempt. You remember exactly where you started, and contempt for that would be contempt for yourself. But the conversations become imprecise. At this level, $300,000 is a position size. Saying that in the wrong room makes you someone's villain, so you don't say it. You've learned to speak in translations. At $14 million, you walk into rooms you once only read about. Not celebrity rooms. Not rooms designed to impress. Rooms where decisions are made that will shape how other people live in ways those people will never trace back to this table. A family office wants to co-invest alongside you, not as a courtesy, because your judgment is genuinely useful to the people in the room. A company in your portfolio restructures. People lose jobs. Real people with names, families, the same 3 a.m. inventory you once knew intimately. You know the leadership personally. You don't call about the layoffs. You review the fundamentals. You hold. The position increases in value. You sit with what that means. That night, you think about a man you'll never meet, mid-40s, a family, a mortgage. A Monday morning that just became a different kind of morning. He did nothing wrong. His job existed inside a structure that needed to change, and your capital was part of the mechanism that changed it. You are not a villain in this. You also know you are not uninvolved. This is the weight that doesn't have a name in any finance book. The books tell you about risk-adjusted returns. None of them prepare you for the feeling of being right about a number and uncertain about what that makes you. You don't perform guilt. You don't suppress it. You feel the distance, the growing gap between your decisions and their human consequences. It widens as the numbers grow. You can't close it by feeling bad. The only honest thing you can do is look at it directly and keep making decisions you can defend to the version of yourself that once stood in a convenience store at 9 p.m. holding a cup of noodles. Net worth, $30 million. More than half your life behind you. More than enough ahead. You have structures that will outlive you. A trust. A foundation. You give more than you ever have. Not for the access it creates, though you're honest enough to know the access exists. You give because money has stopped measuring anything meaningful about who you are. And giving is one of the few things left that still feels like a real decision. Here is what nobody tells you about accumulating this much. The freedom you were chasing. From scarcity, from fear, from the 3 a.m. inventory, you found it. But freedom from something is not the same as freedom for something. And the question you now face, the one you were never chasing, the one that walks through the door after all the other questions are answered, what is this actually for? At $60 million, the isolation is real. Not loneliness. Something more structural. The people you love most exist at a remove from your daily reality that goodwill alone can't bridge. What absorbs your thinking? Fund structures, capital cycles, where to position for the next decade, doesn't translate into most conversations. Not their failure, not yours. The natural consequence of moving through a transformation most people don't make, and finding yourself in a context with no shared language to where you started. Your closest relationships are with people at the same altitude, not by choice, by the natural selection of conversation. You are not a different person than the one who stood in that store with $10. Same stubbornness, same pattern recognition, same willingness to sit in discomfort because you learned early that discomfort is where the actual information lives. But the distance is real, and you carry it. Most of your life has been spent building this. Net worth, $94 million. 3 people know the exact number. You haven't worked a conventional day in 11 years. You haven't stopped working. You think in cycles now. You position ahead of everything, early, patiently, without needing to be right on your schedule. Only needing to be right eventually. Being wrong at this level means a position underperforms. It does not mean your life changes. There is a meeting, 6 people, combined capital large enough to move specific markets. You speak for 5 minutes. You ask 2 questions, the ones the room had been circling without landing on. After you ask them, the conversation reorganizes itself. You leave before it ends. This is power at its quietest. No performance, no spectacle. A room that recalibrates around what you represent, around decades of decisions. Compounded. Somewhere right now, in a city you'll never visit, a convenience store is lit too brightly for 9 p.m. There's a young man inside. He could be any age. He looks the way you once looked, holding something small and cheap that'll get him through tonight. His balance is $10. He's looking at it the way you once looked at yours, searching for meaning in a number that doesn't seem to contain any. He thinks this is a story about money. He thinks if the number just gets big enough, something he can't name will finally resolve. The vigilance will end, the math will stop. He doesn't know yet what actually has to resolve. He doesn't know the vigilance changes shape, but doesn't end. He doesn't know what it'll cost, not in dollars, in distance, in relationships that won't survive the transformation, in decisions that grow harder to carry as the numbers grow, in the specific loneliness of becoming someone whose context no longer translates to the people he started with. He doesn't know the money is the easiest part. He pays. He walks out into the same night you once walked out of. Same $10, same uncertainty, same quiet that feels like nothing, but is actually the beginning of everything. The machine doesn't ask if you're ready. It doesn't care where you started. It opens every morning and takes whoever shows up. Whoever shows up, consistently, patiently, willing to lose some and not stop, they compound. The money compounds, the thinking compounds, the distance compounds, the clarity compounds, the cost compounds, all of it compounds. His balance is $10. It always starts there. It always will. Where are you standing tonight? In a store that's too bright for 9 p.m.? At a midnight spreadsheet nobody else will ever see? In a meeting room you couldn't have imagined 5 years ago? Write it in the comments. Not the number, the moment. Because somewhere right now, someone is standing exactly where you are, doing the math, holding their breath, not yet knowing that this is the part of the story that comes right before everything begins to change. Tell them they're not alone. That's the only thing this channel has ever really been about.